The day I saw Peter's TV interview, I left the divorce papers and moved out of the house I'd kept empty for 3 years. In the interview, Peter said the one thing he'd never regret in his life was protecting the person he cared about most when it mattered most. The one he protects isn't me, it's his white moonlight, Isla. 2 days later, at the send-off ceremony for the medical relief team heading to the earthquake zone in City Y, the same host asked me the same question, Dr. Ruby, as an outstanding surgeon, what is the thing you feel most at peace about? I looked at Peter, standing a few steps away. Even though I knew my husband was injured protecting his lover, I still did everything in my power to save his life. On the television, Peter, once again honored as an outstanding entrepreneur, exuded the same grace as ever. Even seated in a wheelchair, he remained elegant and dignified. I smiled. Indeed, marriage is truly a matter of personal experience, only those who live it know its true nature. The interview was drawing to a close when the host, following convention, steered the conversation toward light-hearted gossip. Mr. Peter, as an accomplished entrepreneur, could you share one thing you've done that you feel most at peace with? The question was so mild even the audience found it dull. Peter hesitated for a long moment before pointing to his useless right leg. The one thing I've done in my life that I can truly say I have no regrets about is protecting the person I care about most when it mattered most. The host was taken aback and immediately pressed, is that your wife? Peter smiled without answering, yet his charm only deepened. Especially that moment when he lowered his gaze, it drew a wave of sighs from the live chat. Wow! President Peter is so deeply devoted. How blessed his partner must feel. Exactly. He'd rather lose a leg than let anything harm his beloved, such pure love. And President Peter is so handsome too, it's like a novel come to life. Wishing them all the best. Unwitting netizens sincerely flood the comments with blessings, but only I, caught in the thick of it, know the truth. The person Peter would rather lose a leg to protect, it wasn't me. It was Isla, the white moonlight who vanished without a word all those years ago, then returned to City C 3 years prior. I turned off the video and sat in the dark for 2 hours. Then I called Peter, expecting the phone to go unanswered. I transferred the call to his assistant, who, as always, told blatant lies. Madam, President Peter is in a meeting. May I relay your message to him later? I glanced at my watch, 10:30 p.m. Sighing, I didn't want to inconvenience the delivery guy. No need. Just let Peter know when it's convenient. I left the divorce papers in the study. Tell him to sign them as soon as possible. By the time I got back to the apartment and settled in, it was already past midnight. While I was taking a shower, Peter called 3 times. If it weren't the middle of the night, I'd even suspect he'd suddenly gone bankrupt. Just as I was debating whether to call back, the 4th call came through. Ruby? Where'd you go? Why aren't you home? I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. My 24/7 assistant actually failed to do their job? I moved back to the apartment. Didn't my assistant tell you? After a moment's silence, Peter replied with 5 words, Ruby, my leg hurts. Oh, so it wasn't the assistant's fault, Peter just refused to accept reality. But how dare he complain to me about a leg injured for Isla? Is that so? But what does that have to do with me? Peter's voice on the other end sounded hoarse, whether from pain or anger at me, I couldn't tell. Ruby, you're my wife. I burst out laughing. Peter, last week's hospital checkup showed my hymen is intact. In the suffocating silence that followed, I hung up the phone for the first time and blocked Peter. The patter of rain seeped through the window, saturating the air with a chill. In weather like this, Peter's numb, injured leg grew cold and heavy, a bone-deep cold that felt like a piece of dead flesh. Previously, as part of my duties as a doctor, I would prepare a medicinal decoction to promote blood circulation and relieve stasis, reheating it multiple times so Peter could soak in a medicinal bath as soon as he got home, easing the pain from his injured leg. But 9 times out of 10, he would refuse it. He even warned me, don't do anything unnecessary. Tonight's unusual behavior, showing weakness on his own, can only mean one thing, he's been provoked by my mention of divorce. People really do love to make fools of themselves. The one who agreed to marry me was Peter. The one who made me keep an empty bed for 3 years was also Peter. The one who lost a leg for cheating during our marriage was still Peter. After flaunting his undying love for Isla, what gives him the right to turn around and tell me, "You're my wife"? As expected, after a night of extreme emotional turmoil, I plunged back into a nightmare. A city in turmoil, fleeing crowds, children wailing. And an operating table drenched in blood, endless casualties needing urgent care. In the makeshift tent, I couldn't recall how long it had been since I last rested. Zoe, who was helping me change into surgical scrubs, shoved a piece of chocolate into my mouth and asked, her eyes red, if I could keep going. 72 hours have passed since the earthquake struck. Every second counts in the race against death. As long as there's a breath left in them, we have no right to say no. Zoe wiped her eyes and ran out again to call for help. But I never expected that this time, 2 people were brought in. A man and a woman, clinging tightly to each other, inseparable in life or death. The rescue workers helping carry the stretcher said. So moving. Right after the earthquake struck, the man shielded the woman beneath him, using his own body to create a world for her. Everyone was sighing with emotion, but I just stared blankly at the hand that stood guard behind the injured woman, the one that kept them apart. That hand, and the custom diamond ring on its ring finger, looked so familiar. If I'm not mistaken, that's Peter's hand. The ring on his ring finger matches the one I wear on my necklace, they're a pair. Seeing I hadn't moved for a while, one of them prompted, "Dr. Ruby, this injury, should we call in neurology?" Only then did I notice the man's mangled leg beneath the woman's silk nightgown. Broken bones protruded starkly through torn flesh. Exhausted by blood loss, he was on the brink of death. Such agony was beyond what any ordinary person could endure. Yet he held on for 72 hours, not letting the person beneath him suffer a single scratch. The chocolate in his mouth tasted cloyingly bitter, mingled with the blood from his bitten lip. I jerked my head back, but still couldn't hold back the tears. Zoe choked back tears as she wiped my face, dabbing away the tears and cold sweat. "Dr. Ruby, please save him. If he dies, his lover will blame herself and be so heartbroken." I don't know if Isla is heartbroken. But as Peter's wife, my heart is shattered into pieces at this very moment. Jolted awake by the alarm, I felt as exhausted as if I'd pulled 2 all-nighters in a row. Not even an iced Americano could rescue my face from its listless, numb expression. So when the dean summoned me, I even suspected I'd made a mistake at work. After a quick debrief and confirming everything was in order, I made my way to the dean's office, my forehead glistening with cold sweat. The moment I entered, the dean's graying eyebrows furrowed. "Ruby, this state you're in is unacceptable. Look in the mirror, what patient would feel comfortable entrusting themselves to you?" I could only admit my mistake, unable to argue back. Compared to his venerable figure, white-haired yet youthful, I truly looked as shadowy and frail as a ghost. Perhaps seeing my earnest attitude, the dean softened his tone and got down to business. "Did you catch last night's news? An earthquake also struck City Y. While its magnitude wasn't as high as the one we experienced 6 months ago, City Y's frigid climate and underdeveloped medical infrastructure have created significant challenges for rescue efforts." Another earthquake. My hand in the white coat pocket jerked violently, palms drenched in cold sweat. "Our hospital is organizing a medical team to provide support. You." My neatly trimmed nails dug into my palm as I heard myself blurt out before the director could speak, "Director, let me go." The old dean nodded with satisfaction. "Even if you hadn't volunteered, I would have assigned you to this mission. First, because of your professional expertise, and second, because of your rescue experience. But one thing, you must pace yourself. Don't push yourself to the point of exhaustion like last time." I really want to tell the dean that my last episode of shock wasn't due to exhaustion. At least not entirely. During Peter's surgery, I bit down so hard my mouth bled. My lip was bitten through, forcing me to wear a mask in public for the next 2 weeks. When the surgery finally ended and I lifted the sterile drape to see Peter's face, still as handsome as ever, I couldn't hold on any longer. It was Peter's betrayal that dealt me the final blow. Stepping out of the dean's office, I stood in the corridor for a moment, soaking up the sun. Before I could feel its warmth, I received a call from Tom, the assistant. "Madam, President Peter asked me to inquire where his silver tie with subtle patterns is. He needs it for tonight." I snorted in derision. "Assistant Tom, tell your President Peter to speak plainly, don't be so vaguely disgusting." After a moment's silence, Assistant Tom's voice came through again. "President Peter says he hopes you'll consider this calmly and not act impulsively." I'm so furious I could laugh. "How patient do you think I am, Ruby, that Peter dares to humiliate me like this? Then kindly tell him, sign if he wants to, or refuse and face the lawsuit." Suddenly, I felt this medical aid had arrived at just the right moment. Of course, I always hope for world peace, bountiful harvests, and longevity for all. But being able to step away from my usual life, even temporarily, felt like a chance to catch my breath. I found myself almost eager for it. But Peter was like a man possessed. Tom's assistant kept calling nonstop, more calls than he'd made in the past 4 years combined. Cutting through all the nonsense, it boiled down to one thing: Peter wanted to see me. He believed we needed to have a frank and open conversation. Tom's assistant relayed the exact words: "Ruby, I don't think suddenly bringing up divorce is a rational move. Even if you don't consider yourself, you should think about the elders on both sides. Peter is indeed cunning, knowing he couldn't sway me, he brought in the parents from both families. After all, Peter and I were practically arranged to marry. We grew up in the same social circle, and our parents knew each other well. When we reached marriageable age, it only made sense to pair up two unmarried individuals. From the matchmaking to the wedding, our parents handled nearly everything. I merely nodded when I learned Peter had also agreed to the marriage. But no one knew that the reason I nodded was because I'd liked Peter since childhood. That tall, slender boy in the white shirt was the constant presence throughout my first stirrings of love. But back then, Peter didn't see me. All his thoughts and attention were focused entirely on Isla. Isla was beautiful and rebellious, never cowering in shame despite having a father who was a compulsive gambler and alcoholic. Instead, she blossomed like a flower in full bloom, flaunting her charm at an age when it was hardly appropriate. She skipped class, talked back to teachers, and handed in blank exams. I even bumped into her several times in the bathroom, heavily made up and smoking. Through the blue haze, she curled her bright red lips at me. "Goody two-shoes, wanna have one?" Compared to Isla, I was the model student in my plain school uniform. Her rebellious spirit made me look dull and unremarkable by comparison. The only time I recall Isla wearing her school uniform without makeup was when we raised funds for her mother. Even while receiving help, she stood tall and held her head high. "Thank you all for your kindness and support. I will repay this debt." Upon graduating high school, Isla did indeed return all of our donations, except for Peter's. It was only then that I learned Peter had donated 200,000 yuan to Isla, nearly 10 times the total amount contributed by all of us combined. Isla certainly didn't have that kind of money to pay him back. All the money she saved from her summer job had been stolen by her father for gambling and drinking. Even the money she paid us back was borrowed from Peter. I thought Isla would accept Peter's help, assuming they had already confirmed their relationship. But unexpectedly, Isla left City C without even taking the college entrance exam. The night before she left, she arranged to meet Peter at a small hotel, intending to repay him in her own way. I don't know how Peter spent that night. But I know Isla never managed to pay him back. On the night Peter and I got married, he got drunk and refused to go through the bedroom door, instead collapsing on the sofa. I held a cup of honey water and stayed with him all night. I listened clearly to every word of his heartfelt confession after he sobered up. "Isla, if I'd known then, I shouldn't have let you go that night." I didn't cry or make a scene. The next morning, I filed for divorce. I agreed to this arranged marriage because I love Peter, not because I can tolerate a husband who shares my bed but not my dreams. No, not even the bed. The irony is that Peter actually turned around and accused me of treating marriage like a game. As if it wasn't him who, on our wedding night, tearfully said he shouldn't have let Isla go. I had no choice but to play back the recording of his drunken ramblings, forcing him to hear his own confession to Isla. Only then did Peter painfully recount his bitter first love to me. He promised me that he and Isla had ended things long ago, and that I was the wife he intended to spend his life with. I believed him. Because I knew that after Isla left without a word, she cut off contact with all of us. Including Peter. After our long talk on the second day of our marriage, Peter and I both walked on eggshells. Our carefully nurtured marriage appeared blissfully perfect to outsiders. Peter picks me up from work at the hospital and occasionally brings me flowers and jewelry. During my time off, I roll up my sleeves to cook and clean, striving to become a dutiful wife. Yet because of that thorn from our wedding night, Peter and I have never been able to achieve true intimacy. But our relationship grew increasingly harmonious, becoming more and more like a truly loving married couple. On our first wedding anniversary, Peter bought flowers and arranged a candlelit dinner. He even specially commissioned a pair of diamond rings to make up for the hastily chosen wedding bands we'd gotten when we married. The atmosphere was warm and intimate. When Peter's kiss landed, I thought my long wait had finally paid off. But gradually, his breathing grew heavier, while his movements became increasingly restrained. When he finally stopped in an awkward position, Peter's eyes were bloodshot and his forehead was covered in sweat. Naively, I thought Peter simply didn't know how to proceed. She forced herself to swallow her shame and began unbuttoning his shirt. But Peter seized her wrist with such force she cried out in pain, yet he didn't let go. He stared at her in silence, his gaze fixed on her, or perhaps looking through her at someone else. I don't know how long we stood there frozen. Finally, Peter let go of me, sat up, and wiped his face. Tears welled up in my eyes as I asked, "Why?" Peter turned his back to me. After a long silence, he said, "Ruby, you're too good." I couldn't bring myself to do it. More tears spilled over, and I wouldn't let it go. "Peter." "Why?" Peter said nothing, just got up and left. The moment he slammed the door behind him, I felt so humiliated I wanted the ground to swallow me up. Her body, once soft and supple, grew cold inch by inch until it curled into a stiff, rigid mass. From that night onward, my relationship with Peter took a sharp turn for the worse. He began staying out all night. I began clinging to him desperately. Because I finally understood why Peter abruptly called it off despite his feelings, Isla had returned to City C. Without this year of shared experiences, I would have let go. But once you've glimpsed hope, how could you ever easily abandon happiness within reach? I cried, I raged, unwilling to accept that the marriage I'd painstakingly built over a year could just die like this. But that was just wishful thinking on my part. Peter stopped answering my calls. An assistant named Tom now stood between us. He practically took over every role in our marriage that required a husband's presence. Even when I had my appendix removed, it was Tom's assistant who signed the consent form. Yet I still refused to give up, clinging to the promises Peter had made to me. I kept demanding, "Peter, how could you go back on your word?" It wasn't until the earthquake struck and I saw Isla sheltered beneath Peter that I realized how ugly my 3-year entanglement had become. So I let go. I only held off on mentioning divorce for now out of concern for Peter's injuries. But I never imagined that Peter would, in that exclusive interview, shatter what little dignity I had left in this marriage with his heartfelt confession to Isla. Those 2 hours alone in the darkness, I picked myself up from the brink of collapse time and again, reshaping myself. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, reborn in the flames of rage, "Peter, how dare you?" Before heading to the earthquake zone, I made a quick trip home. My parents were off gallivanting on some continent, as usual. In the sprawling villa, only my eldest brother Martin was there, fresh off the negotiating table. Since Martin took over the company, his presence has grown even more formidable. In his presence, my thoughts are laid bare. Feeling wronged? because of Peter? Martin is 4 years older than me. Though he's my older brother, he acted more like my guardian than my parents, who prioritized romance above all else. He was strict with me from childhood yet fiercely protective. Under his influence, I grew into the model daughter everyone saw, obedient, studious, and never rebellious. By the time I turned 26, the most daring thing I'd ever done was to step outside my comfort zone and become a surgeon. Back then, because of this aspiration, Martin even came back from the military specifically to have a heart-to-heart talk with me. It was during that conversation that Martin sensed my secret thoughts. I like Peter. I chose to study medicine because of Peter. Since he loves playing basketball and often gets injured, I dream that one day, when Peter gets hurt again, I'll be able to work my magic and heal him. I still remember Martin's look of disgust and incomprehension when he learned the real reason I studied medicine. Ruby, is it that mom and dad didn't give you enough love and confidence? Or is there simply no one in your circle worthy of your attention? That you'd stoop to such a lowly way of loving someone? That was the only time Martin ever lost his temper with me, as far as I can recall. Either fight for it or let it go, Ruby. I won't stand for this self-pity. I chose to let it go. But I persisted in studying medicine and became a surgeon. Little did I know that 10 years later, I would actually save Peter's life with my own hands, the very man who betrayed me and our marriage, shielding another woman beneath him. Martin saw me spacing out, furrowed his brow, and tapped the table. Speak up. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up. Bro, I'm getting a divorce. Martin's frown deepened. Are you sure? I nodded. I'm sure. I've already had Tom, my assistant, deliver the divorce papers. 4 years ago, when you married Peter, I asked you the same question, and you said you had it all figured out. Indeed, back then Martin had just left the military and returned home. The night before the wedding, he specifically called me to his study and asked me this question. Ruby, with your older brother here, you can be as willful as you want and don't need to enter into a marriage of convenience. Now tell me, have you really thought this through? I was still full of hope back then, because Peter had agreed to the match first. Brother, I've made up my mind. I truly like Peter, and I'll take responsibility for my choice. But as it turned out, I made the wrong choice. Bro, I know you're angry. You've always protected me so well, but I have to grow up eventually. Like I said, I'll take responsibility for my own choices, including divorce. Martin stared at me for a long time without speaking, finally sighing helplessly, You've grown up. I can't control you anymore. Yet the moment he learned I'd be heading to City Y for medical aid first thing tomorrow morning, he flew into a rage once more. Ruby, you've really grown some backbone. You dare keep something this big from me? But I knew his tough exterior hid a soft heart, so I shot back without hesitation. Didn't you keep that near-death special mission from me and Mom and Dad too? Since we each held something over the other, we had no choice but to shake hands and make peace. Martin treated me to a lavish meal as a farewell gesture. When he dropped me off at my apartment, he saved a number in my phone. David, you remember him, right? If you run into any trouble over there, you can always reach out to him. Of course I remember, he was Martin's comrade in arms, a guy who was better looking than Martin but rougher around the edges. Even though I didn't need it, I still agreed without hesitation. Martin was heading to City S early tomorrow morning and couldn't see me off in person, so I couldn't let him worry. Farewells often bring sadness, but occasionally they can be passionate and stirring. The red flowers pinned to their chests brought tears to many eyes, including Peter's. I hadn't expected Peter to be at the farewell gathering. By all accounts, he shouldn't even have known I was heading to the quake zone to help. Yet there Peter sat in his wheelchair, his expression grave, his eyes dark and clouded. Somehow, I felt like laughing. Strangers who should have passed each other by, why pretend affection? After 3 years of neglect, my husband suddenly repented just as I was about to head to the earthquake zone. Was it genuine remorse or ulterior motives? As if reading my thoughts, a microphone was thrust before me. Dr. Ruby, as an outstanding surgeon, what do you feel most at peace about? The same old question, the same old host. I couldn't help but laugh. Is this what they call karma coming full circle? I knew exactly what answer the host wanted. Yet my eyes drifted toward Peter, standing just a few steps away. What I'm most proud of is that during the earthquake 6 months ago, even though I knew my husband was injured while protecting his lover, I still did everything in my power to save his life. With that, he turned and boarded the airport shuttle bus, ignoring the stunned host and the uproar filling the venue. Out of the corner of his eye, Peter could see the man in the wheelchair half raising himself up, his eyes bulging with fury. Had Tom's assistant not held him back, Peter would have suspected a medical miracle was about to happen. Zoe quietly edged closer and tugged at my sleeve. Dr. Ruby, are you okay? Fine. Why wouldn't I be? Lately? No. From the night Peter slammed the door 3 years ago until today, I felt my first breath of ease and joy. I smiled at Zoe. It's wonderful. Never felt this good before. The plane had barely touched down when my phone started buzzing nonstop in my pocket. Martin, Tom's assistant, the dean, acquaintances and strangers alike, it never stopped ringing. I decided to ignore every single call, instead snapping a quick photo and posting it on Facebook. I'm here. Life goes on. Yet it garnered countless likes. Amid countless "go for it" and "good luck" comments, Martin's post stood out like a sore thumb. I spotted David, he's the tallest one in the photo. I quickly scanned the crowd and sure enough, there was David's sharp, handsome face. I never expected him to pick me up at the airport. I felt inexplicably flustered and a bit at a loss. But when I saw David in his SWAT uniform, I realized he'd been dispatched from the quake zone to meet the medical relief team. My little emotional flutter was pure overthinking. The road to the earthquake zone was rough, and 3 SUVs came to pick us up. Zoe and I squeezed into the backseat of one, and she kept shouting "so handsome" in my ear the whole way. David was indeed handsome, that rugged, intense kind of handsome that girls tend to find irresistible. The flush on Zoe's face never faded. If I hadn't confirmed her blood pressure and heart rate were normal, I'd have suspected she was experiencing altitude sickness. If you like him, go for it. I have his number. Zoe's eyes widened like copper bells as she screeched in a hushed voice, "Spill it. How did you get that hottie's number?" You wouldn't be. I shoved her head away as her thoughts spiraled into absurdity, desperately trying to salvage my precarious reputation. What was I thinking? He's my big brother's comrade in arms. Oh, so you're my brother's comrade in arms? Well, never mind then. Zoe is 4 years younger than me and has also reached marriageable age. Since Martin approved of him, I thought it might be worth a shot. Unexpectedly, Zoe's logic was baffling. She actually said to forget it. Why forget it? Zoe rolled her eyes. Martin's gaze always sails right over my head, and this Captain David guy's no different. I'm not wasting my breath on him. Even though I knew Zoe was referring to their height difference, it still felt like a knife to the heart. If only I'd been as clear-headed as Zoe back then, I wouldn't have ended up in this mess. And of all people, Zoe had to bring up the one thing I couldn't bear to hear. Dr. Ruby, what exactly is going on between you and President Peter? Is he really your husband? I sighed, deliberately skipping the first question to end the topic. Yes, but not for long. Zoe obediently shut up as expected, then stole another glance at David's profile in the front seat. Suddenly, David turned around. Zoe, panicking, buried her head in my shoulder and played dead. With no other choice, I stepped forward and nodded at David. Captain David, thanks for making the trip. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but David's gaze softened, even carrying a hint of a smile. It's my pleasure. Thank you for your timely support. He paused briefly before adding, if there's anything you need, just ask. I'll do my best to accommodate you. Everyone expressed their gratitude, but no one made any requests. The situation in the quake zone is more severe than we imagined. The timber frame houses offer no earthquake resistance whatsoever. The extreme temperature fluctuations characteristic of the plateau climate also pose a deadly threat to the trapped and injured. What's more critical is that a cold front is rapidly approaching. If rescue efforts aren't completed before the snowfall begins, casualties could rise further. After urgent deliberation, the medical team split into two groups. One group remained at the temporary treatment site to care for the injured, while the other joined rescue personnel to venture deeper into the disaster zone for further operations. My request to enter the earthquake zone was unanimously denied, leaving me no choice but to remain at the temporary medical station and focus on my duties. By the time I realized my feet and entire lower legs had gone numb from the cold, over 20 hours had already passed. I couldn't take it anymore. Clutching Zoe and the makeshift hand warmer made from a saline bottle, I dragged myself out of the tent. My legs were frozen stiff and uncooperative, so when Cole suddenly lunged at me, I couldn't even dodge in time. He was so excited. He was shouting in a language I couldn't understand. If it weren't for the look of such deep devotion in his eyes, I might have thought he was here to cause trouble. Just as I was at a loss, David arrived. "You saved his wife, and he's here to thank you." After hearing David's explanation, I finally noticed the food Cole was holding in his hands and the warm blankets he was clutching to his chest. To be honest, I wasn't quite ready to accept it, but I didn't know how to refuse such warm-hearted generosity. Thankfully, David was there. He persuaded Cole to take back that heavy block of cheese and accepted the gift on my behalf. "I can't even remember which one is his wife." "Because you've saved too many people." I snapped my head up, meeting David's deep, piercing gaze. "They'll all remember you, Dr. Ruby, the one who saved them." I suddenly felt like crying, that kind of helpless sadness. But still, so many people have lost their lives. "It's not your fault." David's tone was firm, calm, and realistic. "You need to rest now, and then go save more people." I clutched the saline bottle tightly, holding back tears. "I will." David suddenly raised his hand, brushing a droplet from my lashes. "Don't cry, it's too cold out here. Your cheeks will freeze." He wore gloves, and the scent of leather mingled with a hint of tobacco, wafting past my nose. Domineering yet tender. "Ruby." A hoarse, trembling voice sounded from behind me. Turning around, I saw Peter in his wheelchair and his assistant Tom standing behind him. I had no idea how long they'd been standing there. "Ruby." Peter called again, his voice sounding as if it had been sanded down. I apologized to David and went to meet him. "Did you sign the divorce papers?" As I drew closer, I noticed Peter's eyes were bloodshot, and his face looked even more haggard than mine after pulling an all-nighter. "I told you, we need to have a serious talk. I have nothing to discuss with you. If you won't sign, then prepare to face the lawsuit." With that, I turned to leave, only to be stopped by Tom's assistant. "Madam, President Peter rushed over here overnight." Along with Peter came the supplies he'd urgently mobilized. The cotton quilts and heavy tents truly provided immediate relief. Zoe said everyone was deeply grateful to Peter, and a kind old grandmother was even chanting prayers for his leg. My hand paused mid-scrub, recalling Peter's earlier words, "Ruby, I'm here to atone." I didn't want to know what Peter was here for. Whatever he intended, it no longer concerned me. As the initial rescue phase concluded, fewer and fewer casualties were being transported to the temporary treatment center. However, the cold snap and heavy snow caused many elderly, frail, and chronically ill individuals to suffer relapses, while numerous children developed persistent colds, fevers, and coughs. I had no choice but to switch from surgery to internal medicine, clutching my phone to seek assistance from colleagues thousands of miles away. But as the saying goes, the tree may wish to stand still, but the wind won't cease. Isla arrived too. As reckless as ever, she barged straight into my consultation tent. "Ruby, I need to talk to you." "Get out." I was listening to the lung sounds of a baby in swaddling clothes, with over a dozen patients waiting behind. Words couldn't describe my fury. Isla tried to make a scene, but Zoe shoved her out. Still, she wouldn't let it go, calling my name outside the tent. I pulled out my phone and reached out to David for help for the first time. "Captain David, someone's causing trouble at my medical tent. Could you handle it?" David arrived quickly, accompanied by Peter, who looked grim. "Sorry, I'll have her leave immediately." "Leave? Did I hear that right?" "Peter, what gives you the right to tell me to leave? You're the one who kept saying you'd take responsibility for me, and now you want to back out?" Peter's face was deathly pale, and his dark eyes held not a shred of life as he looked at me. "I don't have a chance to back out now, do I, Ruby?" Seeing I didn't answer, Peter forced a grim smile. "I get it. This time, I insisted on coming just to feel what it was like back then when you—" Peter choked, his Adam's apple rolling violently. After a long moment, he managed to force out a few words. "I'm sorry, Ruby. I'll sign." 2 weeks later, the medical aid team departed from City Y, and David came to see them off once more. As we shook hands in farewell, a turquoise earring found its way into the palm of my hand. David must have seen my refusal and alarm, because he smiled and explained, "Turquoise symbolizes good fortune and peace. It's also, all of us expressing our gratitude and best wishes to Dr. Ruby. So please don't refuse it, okay?" David may have a ruggedly handsome look, but his eyes are unusually deep and clear. When gazed upon by such eyes, I couldn't bring myself to say no. Yet that heavy turquoise earring always made me feel its owner had ulterior motives. This suspicion was finally confirmed when I met Martin. Listen to his nonsense. "That earring is clearly his own, I saw it when he came to our house last time." Suddenly, the turquoise earrings in my hand felt unbearably hot. What should I do? Return them? Why panic? Why not just think it over? Martin suddenly changed the subject. His family is incredibly wealthy, and he's a genuinely decent guy, so much better than Peter. I was at a loss for words. "Bro, we're talking business here, can you stop dissing him? I admit Captain David is a great guy, but we're just not compatible. Besides, I haven't fully recovered from my last marriage yet." But I never expected that the moment Martin agreed not to play matchmaker, he'd turn around and tell David, "Give it up, David. Ruby said you two just aren't compatible." When I heard David say that, I was mortified. "I'm so sorry, I really didn't mean anything by it. My brother just made it up. I'm truly sorry." David fell silent, but didn't hang up. Just as I was getting so flustered I could have crumpled the prescription pad, he suddenly spoke up, "Ruby, your brother wasn't exaggerating. I've liked you for a long time." Looking out the hospital corridor window, you can see numerous construction projects underway. People are working hard to repair the damage caused by the previous earthquake. But some wounds cannot be healed. Just like some people, once they're gone, they're gone. David said he'd liked me for a long time. But I didn't know, after 4 years of marriage with Peter, how much love and courage I had left to like someone else. Yet no matter how much, it wouldn't be fair to that person. So I turned David down. I told him I only wanted to be the best surgeon I could be. David seemed to have anticipated this. "Ruby, you've always been exceptional, but if this is your heart's desire, then I wish you every success." The turquoise earring he gave me now hangs from my phone. During breaks on night shifts or when my thesis stalls, I find myself staring blankly at that blue-green pendant with its mystical patterns. The day before Christmas, Peter and I finalized our divorce. Peter had a deep scratch on his face, Isla's doing. She'd done it because Peter had amended the agreement, giving me half his fortune. Emerging from the Civil Affairs Bureau, Isla rushed over and confronted me in front of Peter. "Ruby, you're quite the schemer. Not only did you take half of Peter's fortune, but you've also made him unable to stop thinking about you." The once radiant moonlight grew ever dimmer, her former carefree spirit now twisted into bitterness and nitpicking. Peter, confined to his wheelchair, could do nothing to stop her. The humiliation and that claw mark stripped him of the glory he'd possessed just half a year ago. Though I no longer harbored thoughts of revenge, that didn't mean I'd let Isla dance all over me. "Isla, Peter didn't split his entire fortune with me, He was paying for that leg of his. As for why, you know better than I do. The following spring, when the crabapple blossoms bloomed, I published my 4th paper and became the youngest associate senior physician in the entire hospital. At the same time, I also gained a ruggedly handsome suitor. David resigned and came to City C to establish a company here. When Martin took me to welcome him back, I was startled. Martin, however, said he should have returned home long ago to take over the family business. David chuckled too. Dr. Ruby, no need to feel burdened, I really am just here to start a company. But halfway through the meal, after Martin was called away by a phone call, I sensed things weren't quite that simple. The waiter brought over a bouquet of crabapple blossoms wrapped in white tissue paper. David took it and handed it to me. Your brother said you weren't ready yet, but the season is just too perfect, I didn't want to miss it again. I hope Dr. Ruby will give me a chance to get on the waiting list first.